Sorry, is it the name of the Twitter account? NAA Finance?
At NAA Finance.
At NAA Finance.
Okay, I just want to inform anybody in attendance that those in the public gallery can use mobile devices through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available on the gallery rules for anyone wanting to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network. 3G and 4G should not be used, and no recordings or photographs are to be taken. I would also like to advise members that you're asked to ensure that your electronic devices are switched to mute mode to ensure the quality of sound recording. So I understand you can't put it on airplane mode and then go into Wi-Fi is the suggested route for that to avoid any interference with the system. Okay, today at the committee we will deal with a number of procedural and administrative matters, and we will receive a written briefing on Budget Number 2 Bill 2016 and the main estimates, and we will also take an initial look at agreeing an initial forward work programme. First of all, if we can ask, are there any apologies? I advise members that apologies have been received from Jim Wells. Is everybody else present? Okay. Just want to move then on to chairperson's business. First item under that is committee membership. I refer members to the committee membership on page 16 of your papers just to note. Okay. I'll move on then to the budget briefing. The Research and Information Service has agreed to provide a presentation to the committee on the Budget Number 2 Bill 2016 on Tuesday the 7th of June 2016 from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. So this is just the Tuesday prior to our next Wednesday's formal meeting. This is an opportunity for us to meet with the researchers and ask any questions around the detail of this, which should helpfully prepare us for the formal briefing and the evidence session on Wednesday. I am asked to emphasise to members that this has proved in the past to be a very useful activity for members, and if people can make it, I think that would be worthwhile in terms of really getting into the detail of that piece of legislation, particularly given, as you will see from the papers, the timescales involved in relation to this quite detailed piece of legislation.
Where is it?
It is in the, is it in this room? Yes, this room, yeah.
And sorry, what time did you
1
say?
p.m. to 2 p.m.
Same time as Business Committee.
Okay. Okay, if everybody is content.
Sorry, the staff sent us every notification on that, just to remind
Yes, we will
us.
send an email out to you just with some of the logistical details and whatnot. People should be aware from the papers that the Minister will be attending next week on Wednesday to give evidence in relation to the bill, so again I think their preparation would be worthwhile. I want to move on to the Declaration of Members' Interests. I want to advise members that all Assembly members are required to register relevant interests in the Register of Members' Interests as outlined in correspondence from the Clerk. That is contained in page 18 of the pack. I would point out that once members have registered these interests, each committee will be provided with the specific details of each of its own members. I would advise members that it is understood that all members have until 8th of July to register their interests.
June.
Sorry, 8th of July it says here, but I thought it was 9th of June actually.
Is it 9th of June?
I think the information that I got was 9th of, I think it specified 9th of June, so we'll check that out. I'm sure 8th of
Yes,
July.
I get that confirmed. Sure.
Yeah, okay. I think certainly 9th of June is my understanding. In addition to the requirement to register interest, Standing Order 69.4 states that before taking part in any debate or proceedings of the Assembly or its committees, a member shall declare any interest, financial or otherwise, which is relevant to that debate or proceeding, where such interest is held by the member or an immediate relative. So again, I would advise everybody to read through that. I know most of you are very familiar with it anyway, to make sure that we are abiding by that standing order. I would advise members that proceeding in terms of that standing order does cover meetings of the committee, and that is this is the first meeting of the committee. Members should declare any interests held by them which are relevant to the work of the committee or potentially relevant to the work of the committee. I'm going to ask members if they have any interest to declare. Before I do that, I will declare my own interests. So first of all, I want to declare that my husband, Richard Bengali, is the Permanent Secretary of the DHSPS and Chief Executive of the Health Service. Richard Bengali worked in the Department of Finance until the 31st of December 2012 before moving to the Department of Regional Development. I am a barrister, albeit non-practising, but still covered by some of the governance and disciplinary rules, which this committee has oversight of that legislation. And I am a former special advisor to the First Minister, the Right Honourable Ian Paisley, and the Right Honourable Peter Robinson from May 2007 until the end of September 2015. So I'd like to now take the opportunity to invite other members, if you feel that there's anything relevant to this committee, to make these declarations. If you just want to indicate to me, then we'll take it in order. Yes, Ross?
I presume it's appropriate that I declare that I'm a member of the Policing Board and I'm a trustee of the RUCGC Foundation. I'm also a trustee of the Assembly Members Pension Scheme. I think that should be sufficient.
Nothing I can think of them.
I'm a trustee of the pension scheme, which I wouldn't have thought to announce unless Ross did. But he reminded me, so I'm, for the moment anyway, I don't know if that's going to be changed or not.
Jim?
Former practising barrister, or is that relevant?
Chair, I'm still formally in the employ of PSNI, and I'm currently exiting the organisation, but with registering that at this stage, even though it's not compensated.
Okay, I'd like to, is that everybody?
I mean, is it the same as the, I mean, I can declare Vice Chairman of the Confucius Institute, Ulster University, Board of Governors, Regent House. I mean, is it the same here as for the Assembly? Same?
I think...
And I read through I'm not sure, you know, just put it on the record if that makes
And
sense.
it's really anything that relates to work of this committee. However,
Technically,
if you've put
finance,
that-
education, so I'll declare those both.
Yeah, and my understanding from reading of the rules is that, you know, once everybody has their actual declarations and they can refer to the declaration which is available publicly, it is, I suppose, if there is a particular item of business where something in your register is particularly relevant to that, then I think it is appropriate. My understanding is that you must declare that before, for example, questioning a witness or contributing to that debate. So again, if people want to familiarise themselves with that, but any queries, if you want to feed that back, and we can get some answers for you as well, just to make sure that everybody keeps themselves right. Okay, I want to move on then to committee procedures. And I just ask, again, I'm going to assume that everybody has read the paper within your pack. So I want to just ask members to note the following guidance papers: the Guide to the Powers and Operation of Statutory Committees for Chairpersons and Members. I'd like to just draw members' attention in particular to the sort of Section 50, that under Section 50 of the Northern Ireland Act 1988, for the purposes of the law of defamation, absolute privilege applies equally to the making of statements and proceedings of the Assembly and the publication of a statement under the Assembly's authority. That does extend to the committees, but I have been asked to emphasise too that it does not extend to press statements or statements made to the press or to comments on Twitter or anything else in terms of social media. So once you go outside the door of this committee or once you leave the formal committee proceedings, privilege does not apply, so it's worth considering that. Again, are there any questions arising from any of that guidance? Okay. The other guidance papers that are contained within the pack are a guide to the role of the chairperson, guide for members on the role and functions of the committee office, providing an effective research service to committees, good practice guidelines, guidance on timescales for interaction between committees and departments. Are all members content to note those papers? Okay, I want to move on then to the subordinate legislation, delegation of technical scrutiny. I would refer members to page 91 in the pack. My understanding is this is relatively straightforward. There is a logistical reason why this is a recommended approach. Do any members have any comment to make in terms of that paper? So if everybody is content, I would ask you then to formally agree the motion that the Committee for Finance and Personnel, under Standing Order 43, resolves to delegate to the Examiner of Statutory Rules the technical scrutiny of statutory rules referred to the Committee under the above-mentioned Standing Order. The Committee further resolves that in carrying out this function, the Examiner shall be authorised to report her technical findings on each statutory rule to the Assembly and to the relevant department, as well as to the Committee itself, and to publish her report.
Are we the committee of the Department of Finance and Personnel?
Sorry,
Yeah,
the Committee
Yeah.
for Finance, sorry, that should read.
Yeah.
That must have been cut and pasted from a previous mandate,
Yeah.
sorry about that,
And
Chair.
the legislation will deal with that. Is everybody content?
Great.
Okay. Want to move on then to the next, which is subordinate legislation, SR 2016-177, the Public Service Pensions Certification Officer for Northern Ireland, Number 2 Regulations, Northern Ireland 2016. There is an explanation in terms of the detail of this within the pack. I'm not sure if any member wants me to go into the particular detail of the drafting defect within that, which has now been resolved. Any questions arising from that paper in the pack? It seems to be reasonable and it has been addressed. So again, I think the department, if the committee is content, we do need to put a formal question then to the committee. Again, that the Committee for Finance has considered SR 2016-177, the Public Service Pensions Certification Officer for Northern Ireland, close brackets, brackets number 2, close brackets, regulations, brackets Northern Ireland, close brackets 2016, and has no objection to the rule. Is everybody content? Okay, if everybody's content, we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Legacy Report of the predecessor committee, 2011-2016. The Legacy Report has been contained within the pack. I have been advised that members can continue to consider this report over the course of the next week, and we can bring it back for discussion. But if members have any comments to make upon that.
Well, I think there are a number of issues in the Legacy Report, but certainly one very live issue is the work that was done in the NAMA inquiry, and I think that is very alive for a number of reasons, but primarily an issue around public confidence. And I think on this at the first meeting of this committee, if such an important issue around transparency and value for public money isn't discussed and isn't very firmly put on our forward work programme, I think it would send out a worrying message. So I think a key part of our programme has to be a very rigorous investigation into the outstanding issues around the NAMA sale portfolio, and obviously the NCA and the US Regulatory Authority are conducting their own inquiries, and obviously we hope they go wherever the evidence takes them, but I don't believe that there's any reason that our inquiry can't be conducted in parallel to audit the issues relating to some of the individuals involved in the NAMA sale portfolio, and just the governance failings that many people believe have led us to where we are, and have led us to the fact that all the information isn't in the public domain. So I would, in the first instance, like to request that the officials can perhaps prepare us an update on the ongoing investigation, and I believe it is ongoing because the previous committee, I think that it was the will of the committee certainly not to close the book on it, but if we could be furnished with an update on the issues relating to that and the outstanding witnesses that haven't come to committee, and any of those that might be called back to the committee.
Okay, it might be best to look at this in context of the forward work programme. I think, as you say, in terms of work continuing, it is very well accepted principle that the work does fall in terms of the previous mandate, the previous assembly and previous committees. There are some outstanding issues. There are, I think, a couple of paragraphs in this legacy report that refers to it. There's, of course, in a separate report that was produced in March. So I think that, you know, although it isn't scheduled in these papers, it may be worth that being circulated to members, made accessible to members. I know it is publicly accessible, but for further consideration in terms of some of the points that you have raised. So if you're content, we can look at that in terms of the forward work programme, in terms of our sort of briefing to officials in terms of what we need moving forward. I'm also very conscious
That's
that
today we're going to do that.
Yes, we're going to get into that in the agenda. I'm also very conscious that there have been a number of activities through the National Crime Agency where, I certainly haven't been briefed in terms of the detail of that. We can deal with it in the Forward Work Programme, so if you're content, I'll leave that and I'll just talk to that a little bit later on. Were there any other particular issues arising from the legacy report or any further questions on it? Well, if you're content, we can move on then to the budget number 2, Bill 2016 and the main estimates. The paper is tabled in today's committee pack, but it really is, I suppose, an advance notice for us in terms of preparation for next week, as opposed to requiring, I think, any substantive discussion on it today. There is correspondence from the Minister of Finance, who will be attending next week, in relation to accelerated passage. That is contained within pages 152 to 153 of the pack. The budget number 2 bill is contained in pages 154 and 187, along with the explanatory and financial memo. There's a DFP, the Department of Finance background paper on the draft budget bill at pages 188 and 191 of the pack, and a copy of the main estimates and 2014-2015 statement of excesses is contained in 192 through to 536 of the pack. The budget number 2 bill, and I know I feel a little bit as if I'm explaining this to everybody who knows, but for the purpose of the record, the budget number 2 bill makes provision for the balance of cash and resources required to reflect the departmental spending plans in the 2016 and 17 main estimates, which are based on the Executive's one-year budget for 16-17 approved by the Assembly in January 2016. The bill also includes provision for any excess cash or resource requirements not anticipated in the spring supplementary estimates. The bill must progress through this Assembly before summer recess and must receive royal assent by the 31st of July. This will require accelerated passage of the legislation through the Assembly. Standing Order 42.2 provides for accelerated passage of a budget bill where the chairperson of the Committee for Finance confirms to the Assembly that the Committee is satisfied that there has been appropriate consultation with it on public expenditure proposals contained within the bill. My understanding is, of course, that the Minister will outline his reasons as well for the accelerated passage requirement next week. The papers have been provided to members for early consideration and are scheduled for consideration again in 2 weeks' meeting with the Department of Finance officials. Again, I would highlight that to maximise the value that we get out of officials, if people, given that we've at this stage, if there are any particular issues of interest and you feel that you want to question officials on a particular detail aspect of that, if you want to, feed that in again to the clerk, and we will pass that on to officials to make sure that they bring with them all of the relevant material and are fully aware of the relevant detail of the particular area of interest that you may want to question them on. Again, I think that this will help us rather than have witnesses or officials indicate that they will correspond with us at a later stage as to the detail of that. So I would appreciate it if you would feel that that was useful, that you feed that into us at an early stage. I would just ask members, do they have, again, I don't think we want any substantive discussion about it at this point, given that we will be discussing over the next few weeks, but are there any early questions or queries in relation to that aspect of the pack? Okay. I want to move on then to the draft work programme. I want to draw members' attention to the proposed draft work programme, which is not overly detailed at this stage, as you would anticipate. And there's a schedule of briefings for the 4 weeks until summer recess on page 546 of your pack. The draft programme is based on business which the Department plans to send to the Committee's consideration for the period. The Committee may also wish to identify its own priorities over the coming weeks, and as outlined in my initial comments, I'd be very keen that the Committee very swiftly comes to a view about what outcomes we want to achieve, and to ensure that we're getting that scheduled into our Committee work programme alongside what we're being sent from the Department. To that end, I would make a suggestion that we do look at having a more substantive discussion around our forward work programme and potential ideas for that, perhaps at the next committee meeting. Depending on business, and that we perhaps keep that on the agenda up until the beginning of summer recess to give officials and ourselves a good sense about what issues are emerging that we would have an interest in. I think certainly in terms of the legacy report from the previous, but also some of the issues that have been discussed, there are a number of emerging issues already. There will be, or it looks very likely that there will be a 3-year budget to be sort of proposed in and around the autumn of 2016. So it may be that we want to take a look at perhaps asking the department in the first instance for indicative timings around what the timescales for that would be. And if we can get those sort of indicative timings and timescales, we then can look at slotting that in terms of ensuring that we have appropriate scrutiny and appropriate time to be able to examine that in some detail. So if we're content, I think, or we content that we write to the department to see if they at this stage have some indicative timescales around the autumn 3-year budget, potentially. Is
I'm
right?
content, but there, I mean, in terms of forward work programme, one of the areas where I think would be useful to get a briefing is in the marriage bill, the same-sex couples bill, because I noticed that there's been some issues raised in relation to legal issues and of people who are married elsewhere and their inheritance rights, pension rights, etc. So I think it would be useful to get that into the work programme as well.
Okay. I would also be keen to look at, there's a number of other issues I think emerging, arising from the new approach in the programme for government and the outcomes focused work. I know we've got a number of people who have been ministers in departments around the table. One of the frustrations I think previously has been this idea of silo working or the inability to work effectively across a number of different departments. I know this is something that the executive is very keen to look at and address. So one of the issues I would be keen that we examine is looking at the use of collaborative budgets, either around specific projects or particular agendas where an issue crosses over from just one of the departments into a number of different departments. There's also some issues around just procedural issues about procurement. I know that has been a source of frustration, and the committee has done some previous work on procurement, but it still remains an issue of some contention in terms of the I suppose the how fit for purpose the process is in terms of speed and efficiency of that. Likewise, in terms of our business case process, that any minister that's been in a department perhaps has been frustrated by the amount of time it takes in terms of business case processes. So that may be something we want to look at. There had been some discussion as well previously around What Works centres. And, the What Works centres have been rolled out right across the UK, really looking at best practice, evidence-based practice, outcome-focused work. Northern Ireland, I think, is the only region of the United Kingdom that doesn't have a What Works centre at this stage. So that might be something that we could look at as well. Claire has mentioned in terms of looking at issues associated with NAMA and the previous work of the committee. I think an identification of what gaps remain and what we are likely to be able to do in relation to that, given that there are some ongoing movements with the National Crime Agency. As I mentioned, it may be worth us having some form of a conversation with the NCA to assess, and get their advice about what next steps we can take and where they are with this. I think we need to be very careful that we don't prejudice justice and ongoing investigations in relation to this. So I know that the previous committee had met with the NCA, is my understanding. So it might be worth us, as a first step in that, having some conversations with them to assess what the current situation is. I'm just going to Jim indicated.
Yeah, well, I wanted to support what Claire Hannah had said about the necessity to return to the NAMA issue. I think it is a matter of significant public interest. I think it touches upon the public credibility of this committee, that we continue to address it. I think if we turned a blind eye to it, we would be doing the credibility of this committee considerable disservice. And so I think it is imperative. The previous committee did deal with it to some extent under the shadow of the NCA investigation. They were able nonetheless to continue. So I don't think that it's a barrier to continuing to make relevant inquiries. My recollection from following the procedures was that there are a number of outstanding witnesses who never quite made it here and whom I would have thought would be necessary to talk to. And I do recall that the current minister was an enthusiast for having the department reveal various papers which they had and had not revealed. So I think now would be an opportune time to invite the department to again consider the distribution of papers to the committee in respect of NAMA. So I do think it's something that no one should wish to brush under the carpet, and I trust no one does, and needs to be addressed with vigour and with some expedition. I don't think it's something we can simply long finger and say, oh, well, maybe someone will be charged one day and therefore we can't do this, we can't do that. No one has been charged, and therefore in strict terms there is nothing sub judice. Of course there is the constraint which does arise from an active investigation, but it's not yet sub judice.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, but I know that everybody around the table would agree that we absolutely want to do nothing that would prejudice any investigation. And, you know, certainly we will put that into the forward work programme. We'll take a look at what requirements in terms of next steps. Are we in broad agreement in terms of having that discussion with the NCA at an early stage to assess what their advice is in relation to this?
Chair, in relation to that, I mean, and more, certainly we would have to hear what the NCA has to say, but I think, as Jim already said, we can't allow this to go away, because this is something that really is certainly in the public eye, and would be the eye of the storm, basically, if we allow it to disappear. We're talking an awful lot of public money, and I think that it's, even if it takes the entire mandate and beyond, I think this is something that really has to be taken and shaken until we get all the answers we want. And I agree as well, if there are further papers that maybe have to be produced by the department, so be it. So again, I think we have to be very, very aware of the amount of time this will probably take, and we have to be aware that it's something that's going to take a long time maybe to resolve. I think it's something that must be top of our list.
Well, I think, as I've indicated, we'll put this into the forward work programme. It would be worth, I think, members having a look at that legacy report in terms of the number of witnesses that have been questioned thus far, who's left, etc. And, you know, again, in terms of the ongoing investigations with NCA, who is impacted in terms of that around our forward work plan. But that is something that we will take forward and we'll consider the NCA
And could we have the
issue.
committee right?
Right, Chair, I've indicated several occasions now.
Sorry.
Just to put on record that we fully endorse openness and transparency and the full truth being revealed around them. It's a matter of deep concern on both sides of the border and both institutions on side of the border, and we don't believe that the truth has been fully discovered in relation to it. But there is an ongoing police investigation. I understand that there was bail today for 2 individuals. And you've already said, we need to be completely sure that the committee's acting within its remit and not impeding or impeaching any other procedures that are going on. But as I think has been said previously, this could go on for a period of years, and there will be ample opportunity for this committee to continue to return to it and find out exactly what did go on in relation to them.
I think just to pick up on those, and we did, the previous committee did meet with the NCA, who understandably were very tight in the information that they gave us, and I'm not saying we don't meet with them. I think it would be useful because obviously some things have changed since they last briefed us, but there are things, I mean, there are precedents, obviously entirely different topics, but Lawrenson and Hillsborough, just to give 2 examples of public inquiries that operated in parallel to criminal and to legal proceedings as well. So there's no reason why we can't, and in the first instance, I think it would be useful to pick up the specific NAMA report. As Jim Allister said, there were a number of witnesses who didn't come to committee. Some were, you know, understandable public domain diary commitments. Some were on our legal advice, or their legal advice was that it would compromise the investigation. But some just haven't arrived to see. So I think it would be useful to all those outstanding witnesses, those people who the previous committee wanted to speak to, and maybe if you could just an explanatory note on the outcome of those, whether it was a diary clash, whether our legal advice or their legal advice suggests they don't come, and those who just haven't come.
Just to make the member aware, we're talking about the forward work programme as opposed to a substantive point, and we have indicated, I think everybody is content that we put this into the forward work programme for further discussion. So, this will be placed within the forward work programme for more substantive, discussion. So I am reluctant to, continue to open up the detail of the issues. I'm also aware that some of the committee members have not been, it wasn't forwarded as part of the committee pack in terms of that report. It would be useful, I think, for all members to take a look at that in due course. We'll be able to do that whenever that's in the structured forward work programme.
Just don't think people don't want to see it long-fingered either.
Absolutely not. And as I indicated, it'll go into the forward work programme, and we will then produce a further iteration of that forward work programme. Sorry, yes, Gerald.
I just feel it'd be important that someone like myself to have sight of the report.
Yes.
Because I have no knowledge of anything that this committee has done.
And the report is publicly available, but we will arrange for, in terms of the forward work programme, for, in terms of advance discussion, in advance of discussions for that, certainly that would be a key document in terms of consideration. Katrina?
Well, mine isn't on NAMA.
No, go ahead. Well, we're talking about the forward work
Okay,
programme.
forward work I was just had a committee meeting this morning, and we've agreed we're not meeting on the 22nd of June because it's the day before Brexit.
Hopefully not Brexit, but hopefully not the day before Brexit.
Or, sorry, referendum.
Fingers crossed.
We'll all have different views on that. But I
23rd
wonder,
of June will become
should
no
we
more.
consider whether we don't meet as well, because political parties will be involved in the campaigning, particularly in the lead-up.
Again, I'm open to views
UK
from
Independence Day.
the committee. Are the committee intent to meet, or do you feel that you will be busy elsewhere? Any views on that? Or do we want to consider it further and perhaps bring back some views?
Well, look, I only live. I'm probably the constituency closest to here, so I don't want to say. I think if there's pressing business, we probably do. But if there's anything that can wait, it could be rolled over. But maybe we'll know.
Effectively, we've only got 4 weeks to this term, is that
Yeah,
With the budget, I guess.
wouldn't want to lose kind of
I'd have thought we
quarter
probably
of
do
our
need to
time.
meet.
Chair, I think with the focus on the budget and only a few weeks, I appreciate the point. I would suggest we continue to meet.
Or is there any, are there options around switching days, for example?
That could create problems with getting room.
Okay.
That's-
Doesn't seem the most difficult issue,
Yeah.
presumably, to surmount. But, well, if everybody wants to reflect on it, we can consider it again. I know that some members will be more interested in participating perhaps than others. And we'll look at some options then, if that is the case for the day before, taking into account the fact that we will be quite busy before the summer with the budget bill, etc., that, perhaps looking at an alternative date is an option, if that's the view of members. Does anybody else have any other issues in terms of the forward work programme they would like to? Sorry, so Jim?
Yeah, I would like at some point to have a briefing on the outworking of the exit scheme
Okay.
and its impact upon the gender balance and the community balance of the civil service. I don't know if the department would yet be ready to do that, but at the earliest opportunity, I would like that to be put before us.
On the list for...
And when I have the floor, reverting to the NAMA issue, I certainly agree that it should be in the forward work programme, but it shouldn't be so forward that it's out of sight. It does need attention. And I think without prejudice to that, we should now, and I'd suggest this, we should write to the department asking them to review the documentation which was previously released to see if there's further documentation which they would wish to share with us.
Well, certainly my understanding is that we will put them taken fully into account. There's no inclination, I think, by anybody to push this well down the path. So we'd place that with the advice of officials in terms of the forward work plan. In terms of the matter being considered, all of these types of issues will have to be put together in terms of the briefing, etc., including the report. And I suppose a snapshot of where we are currently with that. The report does outline, I would advise the member, does outline all of the witnesses that have been examined and who is left in terms of who is called. Some of those people will be more impacted by the NCA investigation than others. Other organisations have made it clear that they would not be participating in the previous inquiry, and I'm not sure if members have any view about whether that situation has changed or it's unlikely to have changed. That can all be considered when we consider the
But my
substantive
point,
item
Chair,
at
was-
the...
My point was that we could write now to the department and ask them to review the documentation that has previously been released to the committee, because My understanding is there were some documents which were withheld, and maybe a different view is now to be taken of that. So I think we should explore that.
Well, we can certainly take a look at that issue, and as I've said, a further iteration of the forward work plan with all of the ideas and suggestions coming forward that it will come out and be circulated for members for further comment as well.
Well, I'm proposing that we write today, as a product of this meeting, to the department, asking them to review the documentation, so that that's already underway. Rather than pushing it further away, that's a simple decision we could take now, to put it to the department to look at, is there further documentation which they should release to us.
Well, you know, as I've indicated to you, this will go into the forward work programme. Like certainly in terms of correspondence with the department will release whatever documentation presumably that we require in their judgment to benefit and to help and to aid our forward work programme. So, you know, I will take advice from officials in relation to that, but it will go into the forward work programme. I've indicated already that, you know, that we are discussing the forward work programme, not the substantive issue, and we can put this onto the forward work programme for substantive discussion. That would be the appropriate place for that. Are there any other issues that people want to add
Are you
to
not prepared to
consideration?
take a proposal that we write as a product of this meeting to the department, asking them to re-examine the documentation that has been withheld? Surely I'm entitled to make that proposal.
Well, we can take a look at that issue. Is anybody any views on that?
I want to raise another issue about rating policy, but if that is a proposal, I think it's a sensible one, and it doesn't prejudice our forward work plan, and it doesn't jump our fences in that respect either, but it does just see if there are any new documents in the last 6 or 7 weeks since the committee, or not new documents, but if there's anything that the department now wishes to release, I think that would be useful and would help to inform. But I did just want to raise another wee issue for the...
And I am also I'm very aware that, for example, as outlined by some of the members, they haven't had an opportunity to take a look at this report in terms of consideration of any substantive issues being raised. We are looking at the forward work programme. I think it is appropriate that, you know, members have an opportunity to take a look at the report, take a look at the conclusions within that report, so that we can have an informed discussion around that. Sorry, Claire, you were indicating something about rating policy.
Well, yeah, and just to say that I would second that proposal if it is a formal proposal. Yes, I mean, it might be covered under the DFP policy scrutiny, but I wonder, could we maybe have a presentation from, I know there's some interesting around ideas around reform of small business rating relief from the likes of NERDA and Hospitality Ulster, and it'd be useful. I think that would be a useful and timely piece if we could get that sooner rather than later.
I think that there's also some opportunities around, you know, looking at this within the context of current regulations around what you can and can't do in terms of European directives. But I know that a number of areas have been very keen to look at how the rates can be used to incentivise investment in perhaps areas that have suffered from lack of investment in the past. So again, yes, you know, at a very high level, I think it's worth adding to the list as well.
Chair, rating policy division is scheduled for an oral briefing on the 22nd of June, so that can be highlighted to them as one of the areas the committee would like to.
Okay, I think Ross.
Yeah, just to support what Jim has said, I mean, I think it makes sense if we do send the letter, the response could actually give us another thing to comment on when we actually see it. So I support that call by Jim, and I think the sooner we get the letter in, the sooner we'll get a response. So I think that's something we should move on, and that will then maybe set us on another course as far as NAMA is concerned. So I think that there at least will, it might actually create a forward work schedule of its own. So I think that makes sense.
And are there any other issues that people want to add then? Sorry, John, to...
I think Jim's proposal is fair enough. You know, it's not going to deflect us from our forward work programme and may in fact inform our forward work, that's fair enough. But the other issues looking to raise, and it actually may set the context of the forward work programme, it may be useful if we were to request of the department that they give a briefing to us newbies. I spent 5 years hiding money from the Department of Department of Finance, so I know how that works, right? But I would like to just have an overview of...
We noticed.
You may have noticed, but you could never find it. I have... No, it was all spent in education.
I feel like I should propose an inquiry into...
No, it was all spent in education. I was just wondering, everybody has an overview, well, the newbies have an overview of the role of the Department of Finance. I would like a briefing from the Department of Finance on their role. It doesn't have to be a committee meeting, it could be a one-to-one or a separate session or an official who we were appointed towards to say, sit down with me for an hour?
I think it would be, I certainly think it would be useful to get that overview. You know, there are a number of key officials within the Department of Finance with a huge amount of knowledge on all of these issues. I think it is useful that we have a number of people who have been in departments as well, because we're, you know, coming at it from an angle of examining departmental budgets and dealing with finance from a slightly different angle than we will be dealing with them. But I would certainly find it useful, so absolutely.
I'll explore that with the department.
And again, yes, as you've said, you know, if we can get those witnesses, our official scheduled into our forward work programme, even prior perhaps to our planning day, actually I think that would be useful to give us a sense about what are the issues on the agenda within the Department of Finance currently, and perhaps some detail. Again, for that one, it would be useful if we can get that in for members to, you know, feed in particular areas of, you know, I feel like saying no question too stupid, no question too sophisticated, that we do really try to get our heads around the detail of all of the aspects of the Department of Finance. So are there any further issues that we want to add to that long list? Again, if anybody thinks of anything over the course of the next week, do feed that in, and then we can have a further, more substantive discussion about what types of issues we want to prioritise feeding into our planning day.
So could I clarify, is the letter I suggested going to be sent?
Yes, my understanding is that we'll put that into the forward work programme and do the preparatory work for that by writing to the Department of Finance.
Yes, raising that question.
Well, raising questions in relation to...
Raising specifically the question whether there's any further documentation on review that they'd wish to give us.
We'll feed that into the forward work programme, and
No,
we will...
the proposal is that we, as a product of this meeting, we write that discreet letter to the department raising that query. Not that we put it into the forward work programme, it may well inform it, but that
Absolutely,
as a single action, we write that letter today, so to speak.
I understand the point that the member is making. I've also outlined, and it has been indicated by other members in this committee, I'm not saying that it's an unreasonable request at all. It has been indicated by other members in this committee that they have not seen the report. We are asking members to make a decision on an action where some members, it's not in the pack, some people haven't had the opportunity to take a look at that report and take a look at the activities thus far. As I've indicated, we will put this into the forward work programme. I'm not indicating it's an unreasonable request.
With respect, Chair, you have a proposal, proposed and seconded, and I ask that you put it to the meeting. Is that unreasonable? Why the reluctance to put that proposal to the meeting?
There's no reluctance at all.
Then
I'm
let's put
indicating
it.
that we were dealing with an issue about the forward work programme, not the substantive issue. And all I was trying to indicate was that I think, to be fair to all members should be as fully informed as possible about the issue. There are new members around this table who have not previously sat in this
Writing that
committee.
letter does not prejudice their knowledge.
I have indicated that in terms of putting in the forward work programme, there will be preparatory work. In terms of writing the letter to the department, I don't think that is, as indicated, an unreasonable request. I'm not sure there's any other views around the table as to whether or not they want that to happen.
Well, I'm proposing that you take the view of this committee as to whether such a letter should be sent. It's been proposed, it's been seconded, and I don't understand the reticence about acting upon it. So I'm asking that you put that proposal to the meeting.
Well, I'll ask the committee if there's any objections to doing that. My only indication to you, Jim, was that given that there are a number of members who were not aware of these issues, who have not read the report, and to be fair to them, that we put this in as a more substantive issue for further discussion. So, you know, there's no reticence in relation to that. I was only trying to be fair to the members around this table. But, you know, I will take, you know, if there's any issues from any members that they would like to wait to see that, but we can arrange for that report to be sent to members in due course anyway, over the course of the next week.
Chair, the request may be very reasonable. I don't know. It's just because of my position, I would abstain in any decision at this point.
Like, I don't want to be unfair to members, so...
Well, I'm asking that the proposal be put.
Sorry.
Chair, I was just going to say, as one of the new boys, you know, I'm more than happy for the letter to be written. I think that whilst we can get the report, and I would welcome the opportunity to obviously get myself up to speed in that, I don't think it does any harm to that process by having the letter running in the background, because at the end of the day, I think what we all want is to get the latest picture. I know the world has moved on in recent weeks on that topic since the committee last looked at it, so the more up-to-date the information, the better. So I would be supportive of the member's proposal.
Okay, well, in terms of listening to the general views and accepting your position on it, Jerry, it seems to me that everybody, with the exception of your position, is content for us to write to the department. So we will draft that up and write to the department in relation to that. I am conscious, and I've indicated very strongly, that certainly as chair of this committee, I do not want to prejudice any other proceedings. I am sure that the Department of Finance would not prejudice that either. I am indicating that I think we should have an early discussion with the NCA before we have any further substantive discussion around this matter, just to ensure that we keep ourselves absolutely right on this, and we keep everybody else right on this. But we will certainly write to the department. In addition, we will look at scheduling this into the forward work programme, and we'll also take some advice in about what our next action should be in terms of the NCA and other matters. Are there any further issues that anybody wants to raise? Okay, if we can move on then to any other business, correspondence. There's a number, just 4 pieces of correspondence which are attached, page 550, 553, 555 and 556 on your pack. Any issues arising from any of that correspondence? We will continue to include in the pack a matrix of the correspondence that comes into the department. In terms of the Northern Ireland Assembly and Business Trust, there's an AGM on the 13th of June in the Long Gallery. The chairperson has been asked to be introduced to the members of the Assembly and Business Trust. Are members content for me to attend on behalf of the committee?
Great.
There is an invitation to the launch of the NERTA Independence Day campaign on the 14th of June that came into the committee for committee members. If members can inform the committee clerk if they want to attend, and we will indicate then on your behalf. So should you want to do that by email or do it now? So if we can just move on then to any other business. Any members with any other business they want to raise?
This is the appropriate point. The Minister's first day brief is a document which is discoverable under FOI. I know that because I previously used that facility. Why, therefore, should it not be a document made available to this committee?
Well, I've already asked that question of the clerk, and my understanding is that we have received something from the department in terms of a presentation, but I would suggest that we do write to the department and request access to the first day brief. Is everybody
It actually helps fulfil the role I was talking about earlier
Yeah,
on. You know,
it's a good overview of things. Any other issues? Okay, so the date and time, place of the next meeting. The next meeting is Wednesday, the 8th of June 2016, room 29, Parliament Buildings at 2 p.m. So I put the question to the committee that the committee does now adjourn.
Agreed.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.